Hey there, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments.
I didn't cry when I saw the empty chair beside my father, the one with my name taped on it, the one I reserved weeks in advance, reminding my mother again and again through short, hopeful messages that I knew she didn't read. I didn't even flinch when I watched her walk right past it, her perfume trailing behind her like a ghost of attention I was never meant to catch, her fingers tightly gripping the ribbon of a ridiculous, oversized balloon that read, in glittery pink cursive, "Congrats, future star." It wasn't for me, in case you're wondering. No, it was for my sister, Brielle, who just last week decided she was going to be a YouTuber, not a serious content creator. She hadn't learned lighting, editing, or even how to speak without every third word. Just a teenager with a ring light and a lip gloss addiction who posted makeup tutorials that were basically just her talking about herself while dabbing pink goo on her cheeks. But to my mother, this was art. This was talent. This was the dream worth clapping for, buying balloons for, skipping ceremonies for. Mine? I just happened to be graduating summa cum laude from a university that barely gives that distinction to more than 5 students a year. I was the top of my department. I gave the valedictorian speech, and I sat alone through most of it. People think pain comes in big, dramatic gestures. Slammed doors, screamed accusations, things broken in the middle of the night. But in real life, it's not like that. Real pain is quieter. It's the empty seat in the third row, the way no one offers to take a picture with you afterward, the sound of your own heels echoing in a hallway filled with other people's laughter. I remember looking down at my phone before stepping onto the stage, hoping for some last-minute encouragement, maybe even just a simple "proud of you" text. But all I saw was a notification from the family group chat. It was my mom posting a photo of Brielle with her new makeup setup. "So proud of our little influencer," she wrote. "Big dreams start small." The irony almost made me laugh. There I was, dressed in a navy cap and gown, 150 credit hours deep, GPA a clean 4.0, and the only thing my mom cared about that day was that Brielle got 300 views on a video where she pretended to contour with a spoon. Still, I walked out on that stage and smiled like my chest wasn't caving in. I delivered a speech about perseverance and growth and dedication. Words I meant, even if no one in my family was there to hear them. The applause rang loud, professors stood, my mentor teared up. But the people who mattered most? They were too busy chasing likes and prepping hashtags. After the ceremony, I found my dad waiting by the fountain. He looked uncomfortable in his suit, squinting into the sun like it offended him. I asked him if Mom was coming, and he just kind of shrugged, then said something like, "You know how your mother is," which, translated, meant, "Don't make this a thing, Aaron." I didn't make it a thing. I never did. I smiled, took the photo with him that he awkwardly offered, then watched as he waved over my mom, who had just finished tying Brielle's balloon to the side mirror of the car. My sister was leaning against the hood, mid-selfie, filters on, lips puckered. She looked up at me for half a second, gave a lazy little nod and said, "Hey, smart girl," like that was supposed to pass for affection. My mom clapped her hands and asked me to move aside so she could get a better shot of Brielle's celebration balloon with the right lighting. So I did. I moved aside. I stood next to a trash can and watched as my mother praised Brielle's pose like she was Annie Leibovitz shooting for Vogue. That's when I realized I wasn't even in the background of their lives anymore. I was out of frame completely. I drove home alone that night. The family had dinner plans. Not for my graduation, no. Brielle had hit 500 subscribers, and that apparently was cause for sushi. I wasn't invited, though I'm pretty sure no one noticed I was missing. I picked up a greasy burger from a gas station drive-thru, sat in my old parking lot outside the library, where I used to study for hours on end, and opened my photo gallery. There it was. The one picture that no one in my family had asked to see. Me in my robe and cap, holding my diploma, smiling beside the president of the university, a medal glinting around my neck. I stared at it for a long time. The silence in my car was so loud, it felt like it was mocking me. And just as I was about to put my phone away, I noticed something. There was another photo. One I had forgotten about, taken quickly backstage, right after my speech. In it, I was standing between two people. One was Dr. Holt, the chair of my department, who had written me the kind of recommendation letter that gets stapled to dreams. The other was a woman with a press badge, a local journalist from the Tribune, who had asked for an interview about my research project. My name was going to be in print next week. On the education page, they had clapped for me. They had seen me. My family hadn't even looked. And that's when it happened. That moment. That quiet little decision that clicked into place somewhere in the middle of my ribs. I didn't scream. I didn't text. I didn't beg them to notice me. I just chose the photo, the right one, the one they didn't know existed. I cropped it slightly, adjusted the brightness, and added a caption. Thought someone might want to see what actually happened today. And I hit send. The group chat was silent at first. Just those little read check marks appearing one by one. And then, like a slow-motion car crash, my inbox started to light up. But that was only the beginning. It's strange how some sentences live rent-free in your head for years, tucked into the corners like dust you never get around to sweeping. And for me, one of those was something my mother said to me when I was about 12. After a science fair I had spent 3 weeks preparing for. I had built a working model of a hydroelectric generator out of PVC pipe and spare parts my shop teacher had helped me collect from a junkyard. And I had stood there in the gymnasium under fluorescent lights, sweat beating at my temples, explaining renewable energy to a panel of local engineers who looked both confused and impressed. But when the ribbons were handed out, when my name was announced, when the applause rose up and my classmates' parents were taking photos of me holding that giant blue ribbon, all my mother said as she walked over, too slowly, was, "You should smile more. You always look so serious when people are trying to be nice to you." At 12 years old, I didn't understand what that meant. I just knew it didn't feel like praise, didn't land like pride, didn't sound like anything close to love. And looking back now, it was probably the first of 1,000 little moments where I realized that being good at something, really good, didn't matter in my family unless it looked good in photos, unless it matched whatever narrative my mother had already built in her head, the one where Brielle was the star and I was the reliable supporting character, the older sister who tutored her through geometry but never got a thank you card, who folded her laundry when mom couldn't deal, and quietly cleaned up the house after Brielle's sweet 16 party because someone spilled vodka on the new rug and dad pretended not to notice. My whole life had been an exercise in swallowing my achievements so they wouldn't overshadow my sister's tantrums. If I got an A, it was, of course she did. That's just Erin. If Brielle passed a quiz, the whole house buzzed like it was a Christmas miracle. My mother would bake cupcakes or post it on Facebook or tell the cashier at Target like Brielle had just cured cancer. I was never jealous of the cupcakes. Not really. I was just stunned by the disparity, the way love in our house felt like a spotlight you had to fight to stand under, and how I was always just off to the side, catching the dim flickers from someone else's celebration. It's funny, I used to try to earn it. I used to think if I just worked harder, studied more, aced one more class, maybe this would be the moment she finally looked at me and said, "I see you." But it never came. Even when I got accepted into the honors college, even when I made the dean's list for 8 straight semesters, even when my professors wrote me personal notes about how I changed their understanding of certain topics, I never once heard my mother tell someone, unsolicited, that she was proud of me, not in the grocery store, not at church, not even in front of extended family. Meanwhile, Brielle posted a TikTok of herself lip-syncing to a bad pop song, and mom tagged it with "My baby girl is a natural-born star," like she was managing a future Grammy winner. I used to laugh at it, the way some parents lose themselves in their kids' mediocrity, trying to inflate it into meaning. But as the years went by, the laugh turned hollow, like I was choking on it a little more each time. When I came home for spring break my junior year, I brought a draft of my thesis, a project I'd been working on for months about energy policy reform, something that had gotten the attention of a policy fellow who invited me to speak at a symposium in Boston. And when I handed it to my mom and told her what it was, she skimmed the title, blinked a few times, and asked if I thought Brielle might need help registering her business as an LLC now that she was making real money through affiliate links. That night, I cried into a pillow like I was 13 again, not 21, and I promised myself something quiet and small, that I wouldn't try to earn it anymore, wouldn't contort myself into something photogenic just so she could pretend to care. But then graduation came, and I let myself believe, for one naive, aching moment, that this would be different, that maybe the years of doing everything right, of never asking for too much, of being dependable and disciplined and quiet enough not to upset the natural order, would finally pay off. I imagined her eyes lighting up. I imagined the words, "My daughter's the valedictorian," said to a stranger in passing, like they were too big to keep in. I imagined her sitting in the front row, clapping before anyone else. I imagined her standing up to take a photo when I took the podium. I imagined wrong. She showed up halfway through the ceremony, carrying that damn balloon like it was the baton in a relay race, wearing high heels that clicked with irritation instead of excitement, her phone already open to check Brielle's livestream analytics. She didn't even see me speak, didn't hear a single word of the speech I spent 3 weeks refining, didn't notice when the university president called me forward or when I shook hands with the woman who had nominated me for a post-grad fellowship. She didn't see me at all, not then and not now. And the worst part is I didn't say anything. I didn't call her out. I didn't yell or cry or ruin the moment the way I used to imagine I would if she ever crossed that invisible line for the last time. I just smiled, like always. I smiled for the camera that no one pointed at me. I smiled when my father muttered something about traffic. I smiled when Brielle said, "You look cute in that hat. You should post more selfies." I smiled so hard my jaw ached by the time I got back to my apartment. But something shifted the second I saw that photo in my phone. The one with the journalist and the department chair and the university official standing proudly beside me, holding my certificate like it was a torch. It wasn't just a photo, it was a receipt. Proof that I existed outside the tiny, self-centered galaxy of my family's dysfunction. And maybe that's why I sent it. Not out of spite, not out of rage, but out of something simpler. A need to be seen. A need to make the invisible visible. A need to take up space I had been politely sidestepping my whole life. So when I hit send on that group chat, I didn't expect fireworks. I didn't expect apologies or a parade. I just wanted to disturb the silence. And disturb it I did, because the next morning, when I woke up and checked my phone, I found it vibrating with the kind of energy I hadn't felt in years. Not from them, not for me. 26 unread messages, 4 voicemails, and 1 new text from my mother that said, simply, "Wow, passive-aggressive much?" That was the moment I knew this wasn't over, not even close. It's almost laughable, in a bitter, throat-tightening kind of way, how a single photo, one image, one captured second in time, can rupture years of perfectly balanced silence, unraveling decades of repressed tension and choreographed smiles with more force than any shouted confrontation ever could. And as I sat there in my small apartment that still smelled like old textbooks and overworked coffee makers, watching the read receipts appear in the group chat one by one, I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. Not at first, not even proud of what I'd done. I felt hollow, like the act of being seen after so long had scraped something raw and vulnerable inside me that I didn't quite know how to soothe. The photo itself wasn't dramatic. It wasn't staged. It wasn't filtered. It wasn't doctored to prove anything beyond the simple truth it held in its unassuming composition. But maybe that's exactly what made it powerful, because it wasn't a declaration or a confrontation. It was a revelation, quiet and unflinching. Me standing between 2 respected professionals, one of whom had publicly named me as the most promising student she'd mentored in over 15 years, with my medal catching the overhead lights and my smile, not the forced kind I wore at family dinners, but the real one, the one that showed up when I wasn't shrinking myself to fit the moment, radiating a pride that didn't need approval to exist. What made it worse, or better depending on how you want to look at it, was that no one in the photo was posing, no one was performing for the lens. We had been caught in a moment of genuine connection, mutual respect, and the kind of recognition that had been so foreign to me within my own bloodline that it almost felt borrowed, like something I wasn't supposed to have. But I did have it, and now so did they. The silence after I sent the photo stretched longer than I expected, long enough for me to start questioning whether it had even landed the way I imagined it would, long enough for doubt to creep in and whisper that maybe, once again, I had misjudged the situation, that perhaps I had overestimated the impact of my own truth. But then the first message came in, not from my mother, not from my father, not even from Brielle, who at that exact moment was probably elbows deep in glitter and ring light reflections, but from my Aunt Joyce, my mother's older sister, who lived 3 states away and rarely said anything in the chat unless someone's birthday was involved. "Wait," she wrote, "you were valedictorian?" That message was quickly followed by another, this time from Uncle Mark, my dad's brother, who hadn't spoken to me since I was 16. "What the hell is wrong with your mom?" And just like that, the dam broke. Message after message poured in, some confused, some supportive, some tiptoeing into dangerous territory, trying to make sense of how a family could fail so spectacularly at the one thing it was supposed to do, show up. There were cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years, commenting on how proud they were, asking where the ceremony was held, wondering how they had missed it. One of them even asked if I had posted about it on Facebook, and when I said no, that I hadn't bothered, she replied, "That's what I figured. Your mom didn't say a word about it." The group chat had gone from dormant to combusting in under 10 minutes, and all I had done was hold up a mirror. My father, true to form, said nothing, not a single word. He read everything, watched it all unfold in silence like he was observing a minor car accident from a safe distance, unwilling to involve himself, unwilling to dirty his hands with any opinions. I could practically hear his voice in my head, rehearsing the words he always said when things got messy. "Let's not turn this into drama, Aaron." But my mother, well, she didn't stay silent for long. Her response was cold, clipped, and laced with the kind of manipulative subtext only people well-trained in passive aggression can execute with such precision. "Wow, passive-aggressive much? If you had something to say, you could have just said it." The absurdity of that line almost made me laugh out loud, because here was the woman who had ignored my graduation, praised my sister's fake online fame in the same breath she dismissed my real, hard-earned accomplishments, and then had the gall to suggest that I was the one being underhanded for daring to show the truth. No caption, no editorializing, just the truth. I didn't reply right away. I sat with her message, letting the weight of it settle, because I knew deep down that any response I gave would be twisted into a narrative where I was the one causing division, where I was the one making everything about me, where I was the problem child who never learned how to share the spotlight. That was always the script, wasn't it? Aaron the overachiever, Aaron the emotional one, Aaron the ice queen who didn't understand how hard it was to parent 2 daughters with different kinds of gifts. But I wasn't 12 anymore, I wasn't 16, and I wasn't interested in playing a role I didn't audition for. So instead of replying to my mother, I did something else, something quiet but deliberate. I uploaded the full video of my graduation speech to my social media. Not just the clip of me receiving my diploma, not just the polished bits for a highlight reel, but the full 15 minutes, complete with the introduction from the university president, the standing ovation at the end, and the brief mention of the postgrad fellowship I'd been offered. I didn't tag anyone in the family. I didn't need to. Within hours, the video had been shared by a few local professors, picked up by the university's alumni page, and circulated among a small but enthusiastic academic circle in my hometown. Old classmates began commenting. Former teachers reached out. People I hadn't seen in years were saying things like, "Wow, I always knew you'd do something big." It wasn't viral by any stretch, but it was loud enough to reach the people it needed to. Brielle, of course, responded in the only way she knew how. She went live, in a sulky, low-energy stream that she titled, "Some People Just Can't Let Others Shine." She ranted for 10 full minutes about how insecure people use accomplishments like weapons, how certain family members need to calm down and not be so obsessed with recognition, and how we can all succeed without making it a competition. I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't need to because what she didn't understand, and maybe never would, was that I wasn't trying to compete with her. I never had been. I had just been trying to exist in the same family without being erased. And now, finally, for the first time, I had drawn the line in the sand. The fallout hadn't even fully begun, but I already knew this wasn't just a rift. This was a reckoning, and I was done pretending it didn't need to happen. It started slowly, like the first few raindrops before a storm, deceptively harmless and almost easy to ignore, but within hours my phone transformed into a battlefield, buzzing and lighting up with such relentless fury that I had to turn off notifications just to reclaim a moment of silence. And even then, the damage had already begun spreading. Across text threads, social media, extended family chats, and the thin, fragile layers of denial that had kept our dysfunction wrapped so neatly in place for so many years. The first voicemail I listened to wasn't even from my mother, though I could hear her voice in the background. A tense murmur like a television left on. In another room, while someone talks over it, this message came from my father. And it was the kind of call that makes you angrier with every syllable, not because it's cruel or aggressive, but because it's exactly the kind of lukewarm, non-committal cowardice you've come to expect from a man who made avoidance his primary parenting strategy. His voice was tight, like he was squeezing the words out with effort, and he said, "Look, Aaron, I saw the messages and the video, and your mother's pretty upset right now. I know you're probably upset too. Maybe this wasn't the best way to go about it. Just think about how this makes the family look." That was it. That was the entire voicemail. Not a single word about the actual achievement, not a congratulations, not an ounce of interest in what I'd done or how I'd gotten there. Just concern about optics, about appearances, about the discomfort caused by the truth finally slipping into the light. And for the first time in years, I didn't cry, didn't retreat into myself, didn't rehearse some polite, self-erasing response to keep the peace. I just sat there, letting the absurdity of it all sink in, feeling something like clarity begin to root itself deep in my chest. You see, when you spend your whole life being told to be the bigger person, to take the high road, to understand where people are coming from, you start to believe that your silence is nobility, that your endurance is virtue, that if you just keep swallowing the hurt long enough, one day someone will notice how quietly you bled for them. But that's the lie, isn't it? Because silence isn't always noble. Sometimes silence is just a cage you build with your own two hands, believing it will protect you, only to realize much too late that all it's done is trap you in a story someone else keeps rewriting without your permission. I received messages from people I hadn't spoken to since high school, some who genuinely didn't know what had happened, others who offered the kind of support that sounded more performative than personal. Phrases like, "So proud of you," and "Wow, I had no idea," which landed flat, empty, too little, and far too late. One message stood out, though, from a girl named Lacey, who used to sit behind me in English class and borrow my notes during test season. She wrote, "Aaron, I always thought you were going to do something important. Sorry your family didn't see it. We did." And that one, I'll admit, it stuck. Not because I needed validation from someone I barely knew, but because it reminded me of how visible I had been to strangers while remaining a ghost to the people who were supposed to love me first and best. My mother, predictably, took a different route. After the initial passive-aggressive text, she began sending follow-ups, longer, more dramatic, dripping with faux concern and the carefully constructed language of a woman trying to spin the narrative back in her favor. She wrote things like, "I just wish you had come to me directly," and "It hurts that you feel the need to humiliate your family in front of outsiders," as if truth is humiliation, as if holding up a mirror is somehow a betrayal. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just a tightly wound attempt to regain control over a situation that was rapidly slipping from her hands. Brielle, of course, doubled down. Her live stream was only the beginning. A few days later, she posted a video titled "Dealing with Jealousy, a Personal Story," where she spoke, vaguely but unmistakably, about people in her life who couldn't handle her success, who resented her platform, who tried to make everything about themselves. She wore dramatic eyeliner and sat in front of a soft focus background, speaking in a tone that mimicked vulnerability, but reeked of scripted emotion. The comment section was divided between teenage fans calling her brave and a surprising number of adults asking, "Wait, isn't your sister the one who just gave a university speech?" I didn't respond, not directly. I didn't comment, didn't repost, didn't send angry texts to defend myself. I had already said what I needed to say, not through words, but through facts, through proof, through the quiet, irrefutable presence of a photo and a speech, and a degree that none of them had bothered to ask about. What they didn't know, and still don't, unless they were paying close attention, is that the real bombshell hadn't even been dropped yet. Because while they were busy unraveling over a single picture, while they were dissecting my motives and drafting narratives that painted me as bitter or ungrateful, I was preparing to leave. Not just emotionally, not just metaphorically, but physically. I had accepted the fellowship, an elite, fully funded research opportunity in New York, starting in just a few short weeks, and I had every intention of going without fanfare, without a going-away dinner, without so much as a backwards glance. This to me was the real revenge, not the post, not the inbox explosion, not even the shock on their faces when the reality of my accomplishments finally registered, but the act of stepping into a new life without dragging their weight with me, without begging them to understand, without offering them front row seats to a story they never cared to read in the first place. And as I packed my bags in silence that night, folding my honors cords and award plaques into a plain black suitcase, I felt no guilt, no remorse, only the kind of clarity that comes when you stop asking for what someone has proven, time and time again, they're not willing to give. They wanted silence. What they got was the truth. And the truth, as they were finally beginning to realize, doesn't care about comfort. There's a moment, and it doesn't arrive with fireworks or a dramatic music swell like you'd expect from a movie, but more like a dull, aching quiet that settles in your chest when the dust begins to clear, when the adrenaline has drained from your limbs and your heart no longer beats with urgency, but with something slower and deeper, an exhausted kind of rhythm that sounds like the question you've been avoiding all along, should I have just let it go? I asked myself that more than once in the days that followed, not out of regret, not because I wished I had done things differently, but because I knew that somewhere out there, probably in the echo chamber of my family's warped narrative, that question was already being whispered by the usual voices, the ones who always value peace over truth, harmony over honesty, and appearance over meaning. I could practically hear my mother saying it to one of her friends over brunch, her voice heavy with feigned sadness. I just don't understand why she couldn't have let us celebrate both girls in our own way. It wasn't a competition. Erin always took things so personally. That's how it always played out, how it had always played out since I was old enough to notice the patterns. That when I spoke up, when I broke the carefully constructed facade, when I dared to acknowledge the imbalance in our home, I became the problem, the source of the discomfort, the difficult one who turned everything into drama. And maybe, if I'm being brutally honest, that's why I kept quiet for so long, why I allowed myself to be minimized and managed. Because the alternative, being labeled the angry one, the bitter one, the daughter who could never just let her sister have her moment, felt lonelier than the invisibility I had grown used to. But now, sitting on the floor of my new apartment in a city where no one knew me as Brielle's sister or Linda's daughter, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the hum of a radiator that sounded like freedom, I realized that the question didn't matter the way it used to. I had already answered it, not with words, but with action. I hadn't just chosen to speak up. I had chosen to leave, to remove myself from the gravity of a household that had, for too long, pulled me back into smaller and smaller versions of myself. And that, more than anything, was the clearest answer I could have given. The day I left, no one came to help me pack. There were no heartfelt goodbyes, no teary promises to visit. My mother sent a card in the mail that arrived 2 days after I was already gone, and it was the kind of card you pick up at the grocery store without thinking, generic and blank inside, with 5 words scribbled in her barely legible handwriting. Congrats on whatever it is. That was it. No signature, no return address. Just a final reminder that even in moments where decency would have cost her nothing, she chose to withhold it, as if love were something that had to be earned by playing a role I refused to play. Brielle, to no one's surprise, made another video. This time she cried, real tears, or at least real enough for her audience, and talked about how hard it was to be misunderstood, how painful it was when people in your own family sabotage your joy. She didn't name me directly, of course, but the implication was so thinly veiled, it might as well have been carved in neon lights. I watched it once, not out of curiosity, but because part of me wanted to see if there was even a flicker of understanding behind her carefully constructed sadness. Some hint that she might finally acknowledge that she had, in her own self-absorbed way, contributed to the fracture. But there wasn't. Just more deflection, more theatrics, more of the same. I turned it off and deleted the link. The only person who reached out in a way that felt real was Aunt Joyce, who called me one evening just as I was unpacking a box of books and asked, without preamble or judgment, "Are you okay?" And when I said I was, she paused for a long time and then said, "You didn't deserve that, Erin. You never did. I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner." I don't know what shifted for her. Maybe seeing the public response, maybe watching the video of my speech and realizing just how much had been ignored. But for the first time, someone in the family didn't try to smooth it over or shift the blame. She just listened. And in that quiet listening, I felt something begin to heal. I've been here for 3 weeks now, attending meetings with my new research cohort, exploring the city in between lectures, and slowly learning what it feels like to exist without constantly editing myself to fit other people's expectations. No one here knows my sister's follower count or my mother's opinion of emotional expression. No one here tells me to smile more or makes me feel guilty for being proud of my own success. Here, I am just Erin, the scholar, the researcher, the woman with ambition and flaws, and a complicated past she no longer has to apologize for. And yet, the question lingers in the back of my mind like an itch I haven't quite scratched. Should I have just let it go? Should I have swallowed my pride one more time, smiled for the family photo that would never include me anyway, waited for validation that was never going to come? I don't think so. Because sometimes the loudest act of rebellion is simply refusing to stay small. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let people see what they tried so hard to ignore. And sometimes the only way to survive is to stop asking for a seat at a table that was never built for you in the first place. So no, I didn't let it go. And maybe that makes me difficult. Maybe that makes me proud. Maybe that just makes me free. But here's what I know for sure. The photo, the video, the explosion that followed, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about finally proving to myself that I was worth seeing, worth hearing, worth celebrating, even if I had to do it alone. And I wasn't sorry. Not then. Not now. Not ever.